Hey guys, I'm Joe, and today I'm here to start another series of videos for you guys, something that I've been pretty excited to talk about for a little while, ever since I announced it on my Facebook page about a couple months ago. And I know some of you guys have been really salivating for this review. Wow, I am excited to talk about these movies, and the world's getting Harry Potter fever for some reason, because we got the Cursed Child book out right now, and the Fantastic Beasts movie is coming up later this year, which is the spin-off for the Harry Potter franchise, which made me go, you know what? How about I talk about the Harry Potter films? Don't see any reason why not. I did it with Captain America when Civil War came out earlier this year, and who knows, I might do a series of videos next year for Star Wars, and maybe even for Spider-Man when Homecoming comes out. Anyway, let's talk about Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, or if you're from the UK, the Philosopher's Stone. The Harry Potter films are based off of a series of books by J.K. Rowling, probably the most successful young adult novels or family novels, whatever, of all time. And I can remember the first time I heard about Harry Potter. My dad had showed me an article in Time magazine or somewhere, because he was trying to get me to read more books, as well as my mom. Say, hey Joe, a lot of kids are reading it. They're saying it's a really great series. I go, yeah, that's great, Dad. I have to admit, though, I'm not a big reader. I did read a little bit of the books, but it was a long time ago, and like I said, I wasn't a big reader. I read some books, but not a whole lot. So I do remember how certain things play out in the first movie and some of the others, which I'll get into that stuff later on. But the series of books was very popular with a lot of people, and I think people of all ages can get into it as well. It didn't really surprise me when it was announced that they were being made into a series of movies. I didn't see this movie in the theaters when it came out in November 2001, almost 15 years ago. Ooh. And I was 11 when this movie came out, which was actually a perfect time for me. And considering 2 months prior, the events of 9/11 happened, not to bring up 9/11 in an offensive way or anything, but this, I think, in a lot of ways, along with Spider-Man 2002, which came out the next year, helped America and the rest of the world find some sort of escapism in some shape or form. After those terrible events happened, this movie came along, as well as Spider-Man, gave us a sense of wonder and escapism and fun that people, I think, were really needing at that time, or at least amongst other things as well. I still remember when this movie came out. It was hugely popular, and I wanted to see it in the theater, but for some reason it was sold out, so we couldn't see it. So I had to wait until it came out on DVD, and we got it from Blockbuster, which I watched, and I really, really enjoyed it at the time. And then my parents bought it for me for, I think, my birthday the next year or so. I can't remember. When I showed it to my mom, I vividly remember her reacting to certain moments in here, and I'll get to those later. But yeah, I had a really good time with this movie when I was a kid, and watching it now as an adult, I can safely say that I still think it's a pretty good movie, personally. If some people don't like it, I can sort of see why, but let's get into the meat of it, shall we? And just a warning for you guys, there's going to be spoilers. If you haven't seen this movie or read the book, you've been warned. So Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone is about a boy named Harry Potter, who is known as the boy who lived in the wizarding world. He's raised by his Uncle Vernon, Aunt Petunia, and lives with his cousin Dudley, who are trashy people, to say the least. They treat him like garbage, and they spoil the hell out of their kid Dudley. Now, Harry Potter was left on the front doorstep of these people by Albus Dumbledore and Professor McGonagall and Hagrid, which, as we know now, was to protect him from Lord Voldemort. But watching these scenes with Harry and his guardians, I was so mad at the way they were treating him. Uncle Vernon, who I don't know the actor's name, he did a really great job though, and the actress who plays Aunt Petunia, also good, and the kid Dudley, what a brat. I wanted to smack him in the head. 36, but last year I had 37 presents! And the look on Harry's face says it all. He's like, you gotta be kidding me. You got more than enough presents, moron. But that scene alone tells you that Harry's life is terrible. Maybe not the absolute worst, because they do give him a home to live in and a roof over his head, but they make him sleep in the cupboard under the stairs. Barely has any friends, nobody really likes him, and you could say that he's longed for something better in his life, kind of like Luke Skywalker in some ways. And he also has a lightning scar on his forehead from the time that his parents died. Then certain things start to happen, like the scene at the zoo where he accidentally lets a snake loose and accidentally traps his cousin inside the cage, which is actually really hilarious. And then Harry starts to get a letter from another place, because up until now, at 11 years old, he's never gotten mail in his life. His cousin Dudley and the others find this, and they realize what's going on, so they try to block the mail and keep him from getting the mail. But it keeps coming and coming and coming, that they decide to take off and hide, thinking that they're not going to be able to find him wherever they go. So they find this old abandoned house somewhere near the ocean. I don't know. And it's Harry's birthday. He turns 11 years old. And all of a sudden Hagrid shows up and tells him, "You're a wizard, Harry."
I'm a what?
A wizard. And a thumping good one, I'd wager.
And I gotta say, Hagrid is just so lovable. Oh man, that's one of the biggest things I gotta say about this movie is the casting. The cast in this movie and this entire franchise is so well done. Robert Coltrane, who plays Hagrid, he's great. Yeah, I don't know. It's... Dry up, Dursley, you great prune. And he gives Dudley a tail when he sees him eating Harry's birthday cake. And I gotta say, Daniel Radcliffe as Harry Potter, spot on. Perfect. While he may be a little flat in one or two scenes, he was a kid at this time, so kids aren't the best at acting. But even so, I still think he does a really good job in this one. Even at a young age, he still nailed it in my eyes. So therefore, Harry leaves with Hagrid to Diagon Alley, and as he meets the other wizards in the wizarding world, he discovers that he's a celebrity. And I like how he doesn't know that at first. He doesn't know anything about his past, doesn't know anything about where he came from. So we are experiencing this through him, like we would experience the story through Luke Skywalker, when people are saying, "Bless my soul, it's Harry Potter. You know my name? How'd you know my name?" And then as he goes into Diagon Alley, there's this sense of awe and wonder that he get at seeing this world. And again, I keep comparing this to Star Wars, but this series in a lot of ways was like the Star Wars of my generation, because a series of films that we went to watch every time it came out got you excited, and it felt like a world that was so tangible and so reachable. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but there's a Diagon Alley set in London somewhere. There's a Universal Studios ride for Harry Potter. It's one of those accessible universes. I think that's the best way to put it. Makes you want to go to this world and be a part of it, just like Star Wars. Now, since I mentioned Diagon Alley, I gotta talk about the music by John Williams. John Williams has never disappointed, and here, his music is absolute perfection. Dun dun da 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 da. Da, 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 da. He only did the score for the first 3 movies, and other people took over in the long run, but I liked how they still maintained his theme throughout the series, and this I think is one of his best musical scores. So once Harry buys the certain items that he needs for school, like his wand, his uniform, all that kind of stuff, he learns from Hagrid about his past finally, that a man named Lord Voldemort, who was a dark wizard, was gathering some followers, and his parents were amongst the people that stood up against him, and they died protecting him. But Harry managed to survive. The only person known was able to survive his attack, hence why he's famous, because Voldemort has killed everybody in his path except for Harry, and he became known as the boy who lived. Even when I was watching as a kid, that flashback that they show when Hagrid's telling him that story gave me the creeps, really, but in the right way, especially when you see his mother Lily get killed. Wow. And then later on, Harry leaves for Hogwarts on the Hogwarts Express at platform 9 3/4. 9 3/4? Think of being funny, do ya? And it's here when we meet Ron Weasley and his family. Well, we meet Ron Weasley later on the train, but we meet his family. His mother, played by Julie Waters, if I'm not mistaken, and his sister Ginny, who's too young at this point to go to the school, his brother Percy, and his 2 twin brothers, Fred and George, who, throughout the series, are probably among the best comic relief that you'll ever see. He's no Fred, I am. Honestly, woman, you call yourself our mother. And the scene where Harry, Ron, and Hermione meet for the first time, I don't want to sound like I'm copying Chris Stuckman, but I got excited. It was such a great thing to see after so many years, knowing where this friendship goes in the long run and how they stay friends for the rest of their lives. Rupert Grint as Ron Weasley, again, spot on. I can't stress it enough. They did a great job with the casting of this movie. And you know what? Emma Watson, I thought she did a pretty good job as Hermione Granger. Now, I've heard some people argue that they think Emma Watson overacted as Hermione. I think maybe she does just a little bit in this one, but I think it's also because Hermione's a bit of a know-it-all and insufferable because she's so smart, she kind of lets it get to her head. So I think maybe that kind of got in the way with Emma Watson's performance. Nonetheless, I still think she did a pretty good job with it. And I have to say, after she fixes Harry's glasses, this part always makes me laugh.
And you are?
Ron Weasley.
Pleasure.
And to go backwards a little bit, I love Ron's reaction when Harry tells him his name. I'm Harry, Harry Potter. And also continuing the sense of awe and wonder when you first get to Hogwarts, when they enter the main hall and they see the way the whole place looks, the dining hall and the inside of it. Again, it fills that childlike wonder that makes you feel like a little kid again in a lot of ways. And also, this movie is directed by Chris Columbus, the man behind Home Alone 1 and 2, Mrs. Doubtfire, and the first 2 Harry Potter films, of course. He has a thing for childlike wonderment in some ways, or a family-friendly type of environment, and this movie fits that style very well, especially since we're first introduced to Harry at the age of 11. Maybe it's a little too cutesy sometimes, but nonetheless, I'm okay with it, because it's that part of that maturing as you grow older. Like, as you get older, you start to see more darkness in life, and stuff like that. So I'm okay with it. And another thing about Hogwarts, you see all these paintings that come to life every so often. It's like a moving image. Like it stops and then it plays again, it stops, it plays again. And the moving staircases, the levitation classes, Wingardium Leviosa. And the broomstick class, stick your right hand over the broom and say up. Up! And this is the part that I can remember my mom and I laughing our butts off when we first saw this. When Ron's trying really hard to get the broom to come up, but it smacks him right in the nose. And back to the casting and characters, Maggie Smith as Professor McGonagall is really, really solid. And she's got this nice little presence to her, like you'd imagine her as your grandmother. Then you got the late Richard Harris as Albus Dumbledore. And sometimes I forget that he played Professor Dumbledore. He died in between Chamber of Secrets and Prisoner of Azkaban, sadly. But I remember reading a quote a long time ago that he took the part because his granddaughter told him, "If you don't take the part, I'm never going to speak to you again." Ooh. Hey kid, if you're out there watching this, that's a little harsh. I mean, come on, it's your grandpa. Nonetheless, I think he plays the part very well, and of course, when I think of Dumbledore, I think of Michael Gambon, who we'll talk about later on in the third movie. But he, in a lot of ways, is like the Obi-Wan Kenobi to Harry Potter. He's got this old, wise, father-like figure aura to him. You just wanted him to teach you about life and magic and all that kind of stuff, really. And then you got Tom Felton as Draco Malfoy, and I forgot how much I hate this character. Later on, you kind of sympathize with him a little bit in Half-Blood Prince, but in this movie, and just a little warning, I'm gonna curse maybe 1 or 2 times in this video, seeing the way he acts towards people, I say, oh my god, you are such a shit! And probably the best actor in this whole series is the late Alan Rickman as Professor Snape. He's got so many great lines throughout this series and so many great moments that I don't even want to talk about it right now, which we'll get to later on. But his intro is just flawless, and he is so cool and calm. I don't know how the guy did it. There will be no foolish wand-waving or silly incantations in this class, Mr. Potter. Our new celebrity. Careful now. People will think you're up to something. Let's get back to the movie. Now, while I do enjoy this movie, there are some problems. It's not a perfect movie. Chris Stuckman pointed this out in his review, and I would pretty much agree with him that the second act does kind of weigh the film down a little bit, because the first act is really setting up this world and all these characters, introducing them. And then after that, the movie doesn't know exactly where to go. After that, it kind of drags a little bit until you finally get to the first mention of the Sorcerer's Stone. While it is hinted at in the first act, when you see Harry go to Diagon Alley and going to Vault 713, and then Harry, Ron, and Hermione run into that 3-headed dog Fluffy, which contains one of my favorite lines in the whole movie.
She needs to sort out her priorities.
And also Hagrid mentions it with the name of Nicholas Flamel. But the stone is not really mentioned till maybe over an hour into the movie, and that's really, really long. I think maybe if they mentioned it about maybe somewhere in the middle of the second act, it probably would have been a little bit more focused. That's probably the biggest issue. The first act is a really great introduction, and the third act is a good conclusion. The second act kinda goes up and down, and it takes its time maybe a little too much. And some of the effects look pretty dated. And watching it recently on Blu-ray, it's pretty noticeable, especially when Neville is forcibly taking off on that broom during the broomstick class, when he's flying over and then he gets caught on that lantern thing and he's hanging from it. It was just a split second, but looking at it I thought, oh god, that looks bad. And it's the same thing in the Quidditch matches. It's also pretty obvious there. It's 2001, so you'd expect CGI to be dated, but the movie's not over-reliant on it. It's nowhere near Star Wars level prequel territory, but still, you can't help but notice it. And since I brought up the Quidditch match, that's another thing that expands this world, the whole wizarding sports world as well. This is like a combination of soccer and hockey and basketball, I don't know. Because I do remember reading in the book that Harry says, oh, it's like basketball, and Oliver Wood says, what's basketball? Never mind. Now, once the Sorcerer's Stone is finally mentioned, that's when the plot really starts to get going, because then they start to discover that it's actually longed for by someone who Harry had encountered in his past, Lord Voldemort. And they start to think that Professor Snape is working for him. When Hermione notices Snape muttering something as Harry's broom is being spun out of control while he's on it, and they think that he was the one putting the curse on Harry, so they try to prove to Hagrid that Snape is working for Voldemort. Of course, he doesn't believe him, which leads him into places like the Dark Forest, which is actually really creepy. And Chris Columbus may have done family-friendly stuff in this one, but he's really good at touching on darkness. This is one of those times where you can tell that things are going to get a little scary in the long run. And seeing the scene with the hooded figure, which I'm guessing was Voldemort, after feeding off that unicorn, ugh. I had some nightmares after that for a while when I first saw it. Ugh. And he also got some fun scenes when they finally decided to retrieve the Sorcerer's Stone before Snape does. They run into stuff like Devil's Snare, the flying keys, and the chessboard scene. Now before I get to the chess match scene, I gotta mention the humor. It's really, really great. Especially from Rupert Grint. When they are in Devil's Snare.
Kill us faster. Oh, now I can relax.
Lucky we didn't panic. Really? Really, Ron? And some of the moments when Seamus is trying to turn water into rum and it blows up in his face. And of course, Alan Rickman's line delivery. It's a very charming, family-friendly sense of humor, and I like that. And the chess match scene, wow. That is one of the best achievements that I've ever seen in film. Because this is not the typical chess game that you would see in the normal world. This is wizard's chess, as we saw earlier when Harry and Ron were playing on their normal chessboard. Pieces actually tear each other apart. And then when Hermione says, do you suppose this is going to be like real wizard chess? Ron decides to take a chance with a pawn and said, you there, d5! Moves in right into the pawn's sight. And then, oh my god. And John Williams' music throughout this sequence is amazing. It's adventurous, it's exciting, it's scary, all the right stuff. And Ron therefore sacrifices himself in the game so Harry can check the king. Ron survives though, luckily, and he manages to catch up to where Snape supposedly is, but as he discovers, it's Professor Quirrell all along. And he's been portrayed to be a very stumbling, bumbling, nervous kind of person, but he speaks very calmly and very coldly at the same time. And as he's talking to him, Harry discovers that, wait a minute, Snape was trying to save me instead? And you're the one who let the troll in on Halloween? And I have wondered sometimes. I asked this girl that I work with, she's a big Harry Potter fan, did Snape know what Quirrell's intentions were? I'm going to assume he did, because there's that scene when Harry's wearing that invisibility cloak from his dad. You don't want me as your enemy, Quirrell. I don't know what you mean. You know perfectly well what I mean. You'll have a little chance after to decide where your loyalties lie. And then they start to look into the mirror, which Harry had seen earlier when he saw his parents in there. It's the mirror of Erised. It shows you whatever your heart's desire. Harry looks into the mirror and sees himself picking the stone out of his pocket. Harry checks his real pocket and finds out the stone's actually in there. Oh crap! Of course he tries to cover it up. Then there's a voice who says, he lies. Let me speak to him. Quirrell takes the turban off, and you see this freakishly looking face on the backside of his head. And it turns out to be Lord Voldemort himself, who's a co-host of Professor Quirrell's body. I remember watching it for the first time, and I said, who the heck is that? Or what is that? And when Harry said, Voldemort? I had chills running through my body, and I went, what? And it's another hint of that darkness that's going to come later on. Voldemort tries to tempt Harry to join him. Harry refuses, and they have a fight. Harry fights off Quirrell, and even to Harry's shock, he ends up killing Professor Quirrell. Voldemort is left into an apparition and runs off into the night. Then Harry wakes up the next morning and finds out from Professor Dumbledore in the hospital wing that the stone has been recovered and destroyed. But he also learns from Dumbledore why Quirrell died when Harry touched him physically, because of Harry's mother giving her own life to save him, gave him the ultimate protection, which, as he calls it, love. And that's something that's brought up in the fourth movie, The Goblet of Fire. And that's a common thing that runs throughout the series, or one of those underlying themes. There's plenty you could take away from in Harry Potter. But love is a very common thing, and that's something that Harry has for his family or his friends, which to him is like his family, since his guardians are basically garbage to him. And it's something that makes him different from his enemy, Lord Voldemort. If anything, they may be the best at certain things, but if there's one thing they can never be good at, is showing love and compassion for others. And that is something that Harry does. does. And that's one of the reasons why I think his character has remained so popular over these years, and one of my personal favorite fictional characters. So in the end, Gryffindor ends up winning the House Cup. Harry goes back home and receives a little bit of advice from Hagrid saying, you can always give your cousin some ears to go with that tail. But Hagrid, we're not allowed to do magic away from school. You know that. Well, maybe I do, but your cousin don't, does he? Ah, Hagrid. And the final line that's said by Harry, I'm not going home. Not really. This could, be its own thing, and you don't really need to see any more sequels, but of course, there was going to be a sequel from the books and from the movies as well. But still, it made me feel really warm and cozy inside for some reason, because it's a very touching and heartwarming ending. And that's with this movie as well. It's very heartwarming, very charming, very exciting. A little bit slow in the second act, and some of the CGI doesn't hold up as well. Overall, I really enjoy Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. It may not be my favorite, but once in a while, if I'm in the mood, I'll give it a watch. So those are my thoughts on the Sorcerer's Stone, or the Philosopher's Stone, whatever you want to call it, depending on where you're from. What do you guys think of the Sorcerer's Stone? Did you love it, like it, think it's alright, or did you hate it? Whatever your thoughts are, comment below and tell me what you think of it, and I'll see you guys next time with the Chamber of Secrets review.